Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a real turning point in history?
Sounds good.
Today, we're looking at the shift from those nomadic hunter-gatherer folks to settled civilizations.
Oh, interesting.
And we're using that timelines, the story of us, podcast episode, the dawn of civilization, from nomads to settlers. Imagine like constantly being on the move, just searching for food.
Right, yeah.
And then suddenly agriculture just kind of pops up and it changes everything. Pretty wild, huh?
Yeah. It's a change that, reshaped how we interact with each other, how societies work even, even our relationship with the environment. It's a huge deal.
Totally. So we're talking about the Neolithic Revolution, right? Around like 10,000 years ago.
Exactly. That's the one.
This wasn't just some small upgrade, right? This was a total reset on how people lived.
Right. It's the moment humans go from adapting to the environment to, actually shaping it. Cultivating crops, domesticating it. These weren't just, new techniques. They were totally new ways of thinking about the whole world.
It's like humanity just hit fast forward on evolution.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
exactly.
suddenly you've got all these people putting down roots, building houses, not just surviving, but actually belonging to a place.
That sense of place, I think, is so important. It fostered something we just totally take for granted now, right? Deep collaboration. When you're settled, suddenly everyone's got to work together. You got to build shelters, irrigation, think about defense.
Wow. Yeah.
It wasn't about, each person being strong on their own anymore.
So it was a team effort.
Exactly. Collective effort, all the way.
That makes me think about how essential that idea still is today.
Oh, absolutely.
Like from building cities to global issues, climate change. We get so much more done when we work together.
Right.
It's like civilization is built on shared responsibility, right?
Exactly. And when that food production got more stable, something else happened that's super interesting.
Okay, what's that?
Specialization. Not everyone had to focus all their energy on just getting food anymore.
Oh, right. So not everyone was a jack of all trades anymore.
Right. You start seeing skilled artisans, builders, traders, people getting really good at specific things.
Makes sense.
And that just makes society as a whole way more complex.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect of progress.
I love that, the domino effect. And, it also creates this really important interdependence. The artisan needs the farmer. The trader connects both of them.
So they're all linked.
This web of specialized roles wasn't just about, being efficient, It was the foundation of those early civilizations.
So we've gone from small groups of nomads to these interconnected communities.
Yeah.
And those communities just kept growing, right? Bigger and bigger.
They did. And they were fueled by all that extra food, the agricultural surplus, and, of course, more people.
And eventually those villages turn into something totally new.
Right. Cities.
Yeah.
The very first urban centers.
Cities.
Yeah.
They weren't just bigger villages, right? They were something totally different.
Totally different. They were these hubs of trade, places where cultures mixed, where innovation just exploded. Think about all that energy.
Wow.
All those ideas converging. It was so dynamic. It's even where we see writing developing,
Yeah.
like cuneiform in Mesopotamia or hieroglyphics in Egypt.
It's like the start of recorded history. All that knowledge, laws, stories, they weren't just spoken anymore. They were written down.
Right. It was huge.
But wait, you need some way to manage all that activity in a city.
Oh, for sure. That's where governance comes in. Super important.
Okay, I'm listening.
As those cities grew, they needed order and stability more and more. So you get rules, leaders, systems for sharing resources, dealing with conflicts.
Makes sense. It was essential stuff.
It wasn't just about each person surviving on their own anymore.
Now it's about everyone's well-being.
Exactly. Collective well-being. It's a big shift.
So we're seeing a huge change in how humans were organizing themselves, from tribes to these more complex governments.
It's amazing.
What did those early governments even look like?
Well, there were a lot of different types. Some places had monarchies where one ruler had a ton of power.
Okay, so like a king or queen?
Exactly. You also had priest kings where the leader had both religious and political power.
Wow.
And some places had councils of elders making decisions together. So
Yeah.
lots of variety.
It's like they were trying different things out, seeing what worked.
It was all pretty new and so different from the simpler ways of nomadic life, right?
Yeah, totally. And all those cities were thriving. But they couldn't stay isolated forever. They had to connect.
All right. And that's where trade networks come in, another huge development.
Okay, so we've got bustling cities. Now they need to start exchanging stuff, resources, ideas, the whole works.
It was like the original globalization.
Yeah.
Trade routes were going everywhere, connecting Mesopotamia, Egypt, the the Indus Valley, even all the way to China.
Wow.
It wasn't just about stuff either. It was about knowledge and culture spreading too.
So like the ancient version of the internet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. Information, new ideas, goods, all flowing between these hubs. And all of it was fueled by some incredible new inventions,
Oh, yeah, I bet.
like the wheel, the development of metallurgy, writing being used for records and communication.
Yeah.
These weren't just inventions. They were pushing progress forward like crazy.
It's amazing to think about how these early inventions, stuff we just take for granted now, had such a big impact, like a chain reaction.
A chain reaction. I love that. And,
Yeah.
each new development was building on what came before it.
Yeah, exactly. And all of that progress wasn't just practical stuff either, right? Like tools and inventions.
No, not at all. This transition from nomadic life, it led to a huge flourishing of culture and art.
I can imagine.
You've got monumental architecture, intricate sculptures, the development of writing systems, organized religion starting to pop up.
Wow.
These early societies were just bursting with creative energy. They were expressing how they saw the world, their place in it.
It's like they were setting the stage for everything that came after. Like the pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Oh, yeah. There's so much more than just buildings, right? They're expressions of power, belief, and artistic vision.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just the elites making all the culture either, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Everyday people played a part too.
You're absolutely right. Their rituals, stories, music, even their food, it all added to the culture of these early civilizations.
So while the kings and pharaohs were building their empires, the everyday folks were creating the cultural fabric of society.
It's a really fascinating interplay. You've got power, innovation, everyday life, all mixed together.
It reminds me that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about people, the hopes, the dreams, the challenges they face, their triumphs. It's about real human stories.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And those stories, both big and small, are out there waiting to be uncovered. It's exciting.
Definitely. But for now, let's take a moment to just think about this incredible journey we've been on.
It's pretty wild, right?
From wandering nomads to city dwellers, from hunting and gathering to farming, it's a huge transformation.
It really laid the groundwork for everything that came after. And as we keep digging into this chapter of human history, we're going to find even more amazing insights.
It's a journey of discovery that just keeps going. I can't wait to see what's next.
Me neither. It's going to be great. Welcome back to our deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about those big changes, from nomads to settled life.
Right, the broad strokes.
But what about the actual individuals who lived through all that, especially those in charge?
Okay, yeah. The leaders, the ones who really shaped history.
How did their personalities, their choices actually change things?
Yeah, it's like zooming in on history. Right?
Exactly. We got to remember, these weren't just names in a book.
Right.
They were real people with their own goals, ambitions, flaws, the whole deal. And their decisions, good or bad, affected millions.
So let's meet some of these people. Who should we start with?
Well, we can't talk powerful rulers without mentioning the pharaohs of Egypt, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the pharaohs.
They weren't just kings. They were seen as gods, like intermediaries between the heavens and the people. Imagine that pressure.
Wow, yeah. Ruling not just a kingdom, but a whole civilization, because the gods said so.
It's a far cry from those nomadic societies we talked about.
Totally different. So what were these pharaohs like?
It really varied, like any leadership role throughout history.
Okay.
Some pharaohs were all about military power, expanding the empire. Others were focused on building, those amazing pyramids and temples we still see today.
Oh, yeah.
And some were known for wisdom, for fairness, trying to make life better for their people.
So different personalities, different priorities, all shaping Egypt's history. It's fascinating.
Isn't it? You had empire builders, architects, reformers, all leaving their mark.
Are there any that really stand out, names we'd recognize?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got to mention Tutankhamun, King Tut.
Oh, yeah. King Tut.
He's famous because of his tomb, right? So well preserved. It gave us this incredible glimpse into ancient Egypt.
Right. But wasn't he super young when he became pharaoh?
He was, like 9 years old.
Wow.
Ruled for about 10 years before he died, around 19. Makes you wonder what he could have done if he'd lived longer. Yeah. But even with a short reign, he became a symbol of ancient Egypt.
Exactly. But not all pharaohs were famous for their tombs.
Okay, true.
Like Ramses II, Ramses the Great.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of him.
He ruled for over 60 years, focused on military expansion, huge building projects, and keeping peace through diplomacy.
So a very different focus.
His reign was a real high point for Egypt, expanded their influence like crazy.
Ramses the Great, it's a name that just sounds powerful.
Yeah.
His temples at Abu Simbel are just incredible, those massive statues carved right into the rock.
They are impressive. But Egypt wasn't the only place with these powerful leaders.
Right, of course.
Let's hop over to Mesopotamia, another spot where civilization really got going.
Mesopotamia, the land of two rivers, the first writing, some of the earliest cities. It must have been a wild place.
It was, full of innovation and power struggles. So who are the big players in Mesopotamia?
Well, there's Sargon of Akkad. He's considered the first real empire builder, uniting a big chunk of Mesopotamia. What's crazy is he started as a nobody.
What do you mean?
He was a cupbearer, basically a servant. Rose to power through military skill, political smarts, and, well, maybe some ruthlessness.
So the classic underdog story, from cupbearer to emperor. But what was he after? Just power.
Hard to say for sure. Historians still debate it. He was ambitious, that's for sure, but he also saw the value in bringing everyone together.
Okay, how so?
He created a more organized government, standardized measurements, boosted trade. His empire lasted over 200 years.
Wow, so it had a real lasting impact. It's interesting how these leaders weren't just conquerors, they were builders, organizers too.
They laid the groundwork for more complex societies. But Mesopotamia wasn't just about military power.
Right, there was more to it.
Remember Hammurabi, the king of Babylon?
Oh yeah, Hammurabi's code.
Exactly. One of the earliest, most complete sets of laws in history. Family stuff, property rights, trade, crime. It covered it all.
I remember learning about it. Pretty harsh punishments, right?
Yeah, it was. But the goal was to create a just and orderly society, moving away from just doing whatever you wanted.
So trying to make things more fair.
In a way, yes. It was a big step forward in legal thinking. It even influenced laws across the ancient world.
So again, these leaders weren't just focused on conquering, they were trying to build stable and just societies. It's like progress isn't always a straight line, right?
You got it. And it shows how important leadership was. Not just for military stuff, but for shaping society, laws, even culture. They were kind of like architects of these new civilizations.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just dates and events, but about the people who shaped those events, the choices they made, the impact they had.
And while we often focus on the big names, the kings and empires, we shouldn't forget the everyday folks.
No.
The people who actually lived through these times. What was it like for them? How did these changes affect their lives?
That's a great point. We've been talking about the powerful, the ones making the decisions. But what about those affected by those decisions? The farmers, the artisans, everyone else.
Their stories matter just as much. We'll explore that next, diving into their daily lives, their hopes and struggles, how they contributed to these amazing civilizations.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. All right, so we're back. We've been talking about this huge shift, from nomadic life to settled civilizations. We've met pharaohs and kings and these empire builders. But now I'm curious, what about the everyday people?
Yeah, it's a good question. We got to go from those big stories, to the little details. What was life actually like for those folks?
Well, exactly. Like, what was it like to live back then?
Well, it's fascinating. We don't have their diaries or anything.
All Instagram stories from ancient Mesopotamia.
Nope. But archaeologists have found so much, and it gives us a really good picture of their lives.
Oh, cool. So, what have they found?
Every little piece tells a story. A piece of pottery, a tool, even just the layout of a house.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, this was a crazy time of change. Going from always moving to farming, that wasn't easy.
I bet. Suddenly you're tied to the land, got worried about crops growing. What did that do to people's daily lives?
It meant a lot of hard work. Agriculture takes serious effort. Everyone in the family had to help out.
So not like a relaxing life in the fields.
Not really. Imagine waking up before the sun, tending to crops all day, hauling water. But it also created strong communities. People needed each other to survive.
It's not quite the romantic, simple life we sometimes imagine, huh?
Nope. But hey, there had to be some perks.
Okay, yeah. Was the food good, at least?
Probably healthier than a lot of what we eat. Whole grains, fresh produce, beans. People seem to have been pretty well fed, although of course it depended on your status, how good the harvest was.
So, okay, no ancient fast food joints. But those harvest festivals, I bet those were fun.
Oh yeah, I bet they were.
Speaking of fun, what did people do for fun back then? Did they even have time to relax with all that farming?
What's really cool is they still found ways to have a good time. There's evidence of music, games, religious festivals.
Oh, wow.
Imagine people playing flutes, telling stories, catching up on the news.
Sounds kind of nice, actually.
It was. And these activities weren't just about fun. They brought people together, made the community stronger.
So even though life was hard, they found ways to connect, build traditions, and enjoy themselves.
Exactly. Humans are really good at adapting, aren't we?
Seems like it. And those early cities, they were always changing too, right?
All the time. They were hubs for trade, so people from all over would come together.
Oh, yeah, that makes
It
sense.
wasn't just good for business, it meant cultures were mixing too.
So you've got new technologies spreading, new foods, even new religions blending together. That's a lot of change happening.
Think about what that meant for people back then. Maybe you're a potter, and you learn a cool technique from someone who traveled from far away. Or a farmer finds a new crop that grows really well in their area. That kind of exchange was happening all the time.
It's amazing to think about. While empires were rising and falling, everyday people were living through this incredible blend of cultures. Did they realize they were part of something so big, like a civilization being born?
It's a question historians still debate. Do they feel connected beyond their own community? It's hard to say for sure, but we do see shared practices, similar beliefs, even art styles spreading across huge distances.
So even if we don't know exactly what they thought, we can see those connections forming. It's pretty amazing.
It is. And it brings us back to the heart of our deep dive. Settling down wasn't just about staying in one place. It was about finding a totally new way to be human.
Totally new.
It was about building communities, figuring out how society should work, and dealing with a world that was changing fast.
And that story, it still means something to us today, don't you think? Our world is changing so quickly, too, with technology, globalization, all that stuff. Maybe we can learn something from those who went through similar changes thousands of years ago.
I think you're right. Their story shows us how resilient humans are, how creative. Our ability to adapt, to come up with new solutions, to find meaning, even when things are tough, those are timeless qualities.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away? What do you hope they remember?
I hope they come away with a real appreciation for the journey that got us to where we are today. It wasn't always easy, but it was a time of incredible creativity and resilience. And those qualities, they're just as important now as they were back then.
Couldn't agree more. This has been an amazing journey, exploring these ancient societies, meeting the people who built them. Thanks for being such a great guide.
Happy to do it. It was a lot of fun. And remember, folks, the exploration never really ends. There's always more to learn, more to discover about history.
Absolutely. So keep that curiosity alive, everyone. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into the world around you. Until next time, happy history hunting.